Today, I'll be comparing the differences in context interpretation between individualistic and collectivistic cultures. First, many of you may not know what the difference between these two types of cultures are. To put it simply, for the purpose of this presentation, it all comes down to their values. In an individualistic culture, what is ultimately valued are things like individual achievement, self-sufficiency, independence, and basically the focus is on self-perception and development. We see this type of culture in the United States, whereas a collectivistic culture will value things like group achievement, group reliance, interdependence, and a strong focus on social harmony of the group's relationship with one another. This type of culture is best characterized in China. So how does this tie into conversational context? Well, there is a difference between high and low context cultures. In high context cultures, as the name refers, there is a need to be extremely explicit about the meaning and goals of what a person is saying to another. In a low context culture, much of the information in a conversation has to be interpreted based on the relationship. We see this difference most regularly in our labels. In a high context culture, we see every bit of information clearly featured on every label, from things like nutritional facts to a label telling us that the scalding hot coffee we just ordered may be hot. In a low context culture, much of the information is minimal, only giving the bare necessities such as the name brand, content, and quantity. But how does this tie into the previous information about individualistic and collectivistic cultures? It ties in because there has been a strong correlation between high context in individualistic cultures and low context in collectivistic cultures. This leads to the point of how each of these differing contextual cultures vary in their communication. Let's start with the individualistic approach. As mentioned before, information relayed to another party is very explicit, meaning that communication is direct. With raw opinions, that can at times be seen as rude in a low context culture. An example of this would be if someone were to ask another person to turn down their volume. The message would be explicitly stated with no room for interpretation by simply saying, "Turn down your volume." Continuing on, in a collectivistic culture, like that in China, where a low context culture is practiced, we see a more indirect approach that will not openly voice opinions, and to an individualistic culture may seem like they are simply beating around the bush. Using the volume example, we can see this when someone in a low context culture engages in a conversation with someone who has their volume up too high. They will make subtle remarks that will attempt to goad the person to the desired goal. Possibly saying something like, "Well, I have to wake up early tomorrow. I should probably go to bed now." With the idea that the person will interpret this as, "I should turn down the volume because they are going to bed." This is how we can distinguish between the two context cultures, where a high context will rely on explicit vocalization, and a low context will rely on the implicit subtleties that require interpersonal relationships to fully understand the meaning. I hope this presentation has given you greater insight into the differences in cultures and how they communicate with each other, and that it may someday prove useful to you when you meet people of different cultures. Thank you.